Hey, and welcome back to Cooking with Ro. Today we have something special, a French classic, madeleines. For this we're going to need 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup of sugar, 8 tablespoons of melted butter. That's often just 1 whole stick of butter, 2 eggs, preferably room temperature, vanilla extract, 2 tablespoons of either agave nectar or honey. Here I use a mixture of both. And lastly, the zest from 1 lemon or orange. In order to make these delicious French-style cookies, you're going to need a madeleine tray. I use one from Williams-Sonoma. Now that we have the proper tray, we're going to spray it with some cooking oil. I like to use Pam. Then I lightly dust it with some flour. After that, you're going to stick it in the freezer for an hour. All of this is to ensure that the madeleines will not stick once we're removing them. Now, in a large bowl, we're going to mix all of our dry ingredients, starting with the flour. As I've mentioned in a previous video, we sift the flour in order to make it light and fluffy and airy. Next, we add in our 1 teaspoon of baking powder. It's a leavening agent that lightens and softens the mixture. And lastly, we add in our 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Salt not only sharpens and brightens the flavor in baked goods, but it also helps prevent staleness. Now that we have our dry ingredients finished, let's push them out of the way and move on to our smaller wet bowl. To start, we're going to whisk our 2 room temperature eggs. Eggs play a key part in baking. They create structure and stability within a batter, help thicken and emulsify sauces and custards, and they add moisture to cakes and other baked goods, as well as they can even act as a glue or a glaze. Next, we're going to add in our sugar. Not only does sugar make things sweet, but sugar actually affects texture. This union of sugar and water affects the texture of baked goods in 2 important ways. It keeps baked goods soft and moist, and it also creates tenderness. Every ingredient that we add affects the chemistry and structural makeup of our baked goods. Now we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Up next are 2 tablespoons of honey or your chosen sweetener. I like to use 1 tablespoon of this lavender honey that I got from Vermont, and 1 tablespoon of agave nectar. Then we're going to take our lemon and zest it and whisk it into the mix. Now it's time to add in the butter. Since we want to have it all melted, we're going to put it into a bowl and stick it into the microwave for about 30 to 60 seconds. Careful though, it's pretty hot. With caution, we're going to pour this into our wet bowl mixture and just mix it all in there. Now comes the time to mix in our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients. You want to pour it slowly and mix it a little bit at a time. Once we have it all thoroughly mixed, we're going to take a large Ziploc bag and pour our batter into it, because later we're going to pipe this onto our madeleine tray. Now that we have it in our Ziploc bag, just seal the bag and stick it into the refrigerator for an hour.
1 hour later.
Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. After an hour has passed, remove your Ziploc bag with the batter from the fridge and also remove the madeleine tray from the freezer. Push the batter down and twist a Ziploc bag into a nice point. This will be our makeshift pastry bag that we will use to pipe in the batter onto our madeleine tray. Take a small pair of scissors and cut off the tip of the bag. We're going to squeeze out the batter to fill almost halfway of the madeleine mold. As they cook, the cookie cakes will expand, so this helps us to not overstuff the trays. Here's a close-up of how much I fill in the trays. I'd consider this to be on the more full side of how much you want to fill them up. Now you can leave them as is or add in some toppings. For this I'm going to make 4 different types of madeleines. I'm going to start with a rose variety by sprinkling on some rose flakes that I have. I'm also going to make a row of lavender flavored madeleines by adding in some lavender flakes. The third one is going to be orange peels. And the last row I'm going to keep just plain, a classic. We're going to stick our tray into the oven that should be set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. We're only going to leave them in for 8 to 10 minutes. Be sure to remove them once the edges start to get golden. After we remove them from the oven, we're going to let them rest for another 5 to maybe 10 minutes, so that way we can remove them from the mold without breaking the cookies. After about 5 minutes, we can remove them from the tray and place them onto a rack so that way they can continue to air chill. These are looking wonderfully appetizing, aren't they? This small cake has been favored by kings and peasants since the 17th century and was cemented into French hearts and culture by the French philosopher Proust in the early 1920s. I always like to pair my madeleines with a cup of tea. And that concludes today's video. Serve yourself a nice pot of tea to pair with these madeleines. I love to have them for breakfast the next day. I usually place them onto a plate and wrap it with a fine cloth so I can keep them from getting stale. As always, if you enjoyed this little video, give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more. You can also find me on Instagram at Alquatica, where I show you some behind the scenes of these videos and other artistic projects I'm working on. See you next week. Ciao!